friends. Welcome back to another episode of Conservation Stories. Conservation Stories is a podcast brought to you by the Sand Hill Area Research Association. I'm your host, Tillery Timmons-Sims, and today I have somebody that has something in common with me, and that is the last name, my maiden name. I have with me my brother, Dusty Timmons, and Dusty is my brother, just younger than me, and he is a viticulturist, has been in the grape industry really since the 90s. Yes, since we kind of had a revival of that industry. And the history of wine in Texas is a long one, and Dusty is also he's kind of like an amateur historian. So we're gonna put him on the spot and ask him some questions, but very interesting. And some changes, some not so great changes have happened this year in the wine industry and the grape industry. So why this is important for our listeners is because most of our grapes for Texas wine are grown right here in the High Plains region, and it's a $20 billion impact on the state of Texas, and we have about 5,000 acres, and comparatively the cotton industry is a $24 billion industry on the state of Texas, and we have about 5 million acres of cotton. So it has been an industry that has taken off fast, has had a huge impact, and we're going to start kind of at the beginning before we talk about the bad news from this year.
All right.
Okay.
Well, really, the grape industry in Texas goes back a very, very long ways.
Time.
Actually, if you go to France, I can't remember what the guy's name is now. You'll have to forgive me.
Yeah.
But there was a gentleman in Texas that isolated that found rootstock.
You're talking about Munson?
Munson, yeah.
Yes.
TV Munson.
Yes.
TV Munson.
Yeah.
And he found rootstocks that were resistant to a louse called phylloxera, which is a soil-borne insect that threatened to wipe out the industry in France. Almost all of their grapes in France are on rootstock that are derived from native grapes in Texas, and that's the vast majority of the rootstocks can actually trace their lineage back to the Texas in this area.
So that means that rootstock had to have originated there in France or in that region to begin with, and then it came to Texas.
You'd have to go. Maybe it goes back to when the continents were all linked together. I don't know.
Right.
It didn't come from France to Texas and then go back to France.
Okay.
I mean, it was here.
It was here.
It was here before the Europeans, before the Europeans got
before
here.
the Europeans. Yeah. So, but we do have like Spanish grapes. Do we not?
No, that's actually not.
Yes.
We actually had some of the Spanish missionaries actually planting grapes down around Del Rio area, I think is where that was.
Yes.
Don't hold me to that.
Okay.
But
I told you he was an amateur.
I know the oldest winery in the state of Texas is actually in Del Rio.
Okay.
It's the oldest continuously producing winery. It made it all the way through Prohibition because it got classified as a sacramental. They made sacramental wines.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and they actually buy grapes from Terry County, and have for eons. I mean, for a long, long time.
Wow,
I mean,
yeah, because
eons. I'm 50,
right,
so my whole life.
Right, because we've had grapes in Terry County. Just for people that want to know where this is, so we are here recording in Lubbock County, which is Lubbock, Texas, and then Terry County is south of us, south and west, and it's about you go through basically 2 counties to get there.
In Terry County, you've got out of Plains, you had the Newsoms, Haas Newsom and Neil Newsom out of Plains.
There for years.
Been there for a long time. 80s, I think is when they went in. But this is actually I want to say it's the 3rd iteration of grapes on the High Plains.
I don't think I knew that. I knew that I was thinking it was the 2nd, but it's the 3rd.
It may just be the. I'm trying to go back in my head and think if there was anything before. No, it would be the 2nd.
Yeah.
Haas and Neil Newsom came in the 1st. There was a big planting. A lot of stuff went in. We had an October freeze. Wineries quit buying grapes for a while. The economy went through some,
and we weren't necessarily known for high quality.
Well, and at that time, the whole wine industry wasn't really known. I mean, you just come off of the wine
industry was not known for good wine. That doesn't necessarily mean that we weren't known for good grapes, because this is a great region to grow grapes in.
It's a pretty solid region. The only thing that The only thing that West Texas misses from being the best wine region in the world is the Pacific Ocean, about 70 miles west of here.
If we had the Pacific Ocean 70 miles west of here, we would be Napa.
If we could just get, Colorado, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico to get on board with this go away business.
Yes,
But I mean, when you have a coastal climate like that,
yes,
it mitigates the lows especially.
Okay.
The highs still get there kind of warm and stuff, but I think the record low in Napa is somewhere around 26 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
It's been a long time since I've seen that number, so again, don't hold me to it. I'm kind of halfway pulling things out of my hind parts here, but when you have what we have here, you have a continental climate, so you have late winter freeze, late fall freezes, early spring freezes. You have hail. We've mitigated a lot of that with the introduction.
Technology,
with
nets.
Well, your other brother
our older brother Andy.
Yes,
and we will say yes. Andy is kind of like what would you call him now in the second iteration of the industry? I am thinking he's kind of like the grandfather.
Pretty much.
Thing.
I mean, I kind of feel
Sorry,
weird
Andy.
talking about my brother this way, but most all of the massive cultural innovations in vineyards, be it hailnet, be it the extensive use of wind machines and stuff, and that kind of stuff has come from him.
Yes,
he was the first one to do it.
Yes,
and
so we were going to brag. He is, but it's not true. It's true.
Yeah, it ain't bragging if you can do it.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
But he's gone in and he sat down and looked at it and said, okay, what are the challenges we face? Well, it's an inconsistent crop because of freeze and hail.
Right.
And so what's the first thing that he did was, he started looking at what do they do elsewhere?
Yeah. And that to me is the key to Andy's success so many times is humility. If you don't know, you shut up and listen is one thing he told me one time. And I think that is the key to why he's gone, he's made friends, he's sat down and he's listened, and then he's brought back. And this reminds me, this is not the first time I have quoted this on this podcast, but there is a great quote by a man named Robert Mason, and he's talking about agriculture that grew up here on the South Plains and how we kept one eye on our neighbors' crops and techniques and adopted those which would best serve us. And I think a lot about that when I think about Andy.
It's a very un-Timmons trait. He goes against genetics a lot.
I think so.
But he does a really good job. He did a really good job of looking at what was available, and then also having the financial resources to go out there and do it, because it's not cheap. I mean,
not right.
The good thing about it is he got in kind of on the ground floor. The wind machines that he bought were 35,000, something like that, to get them put in, and now they're running 70.
Right. So let's go back just a little bit too, because this second iteration of this industry was really brought about because people were thinking we are running out of water.
Yeah. Exactly. That's one of the reasons, the primary driver. That's a big driver.
Yes. For
the growers.
Yes.
The number one driver is always money.
Sure. Economics.
The bottom line is always what matters. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're running out, if you're starving. But Doc McPherson, Kim McPherson's dad, who was a chemistry professor at Tech, he is one of the founders of Yano. He really got the first iteration going through it. Okay. And so when we came in to the late 90s, there was only a handful of growers that made it through it.
Yeah.
The Youngs in Brownfield had made it through it. Neil Newsom out in Plains had made it through it, and I think that may be all.
Those are the pioneers. Yeah. Those folks, and that's the folks that we look to, and just on a not that we're not already on a personal note here, but our family is anti-alcohol for many years.
Yes.
And Terry County, ironically, was still in prohibition status.
Yeah.
And
even today, it's only damp. I mean,
it's not even fully wet, right?
It's just damp.
So it's ironic that's where the majority of our grapes are grown, are in that county that we grew up in, and grew up that was your really number one go to hail card was alcohol.
Yes, that and dancing
and alcohol.
We're dating ourselves.
We are.
Yeah,
we are. Okay, move on past the personal stuff. We are going to say that those two families, the Newsoms and the Youngs, were instrumental in, they were the ones that knew what to do here.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, I had a discussion with Bobby Young, who is the Young that started the vineyard. And he primarily he made two types of grapes. He had Cabernet Sauvignon grapes and he had Muscat Canelli grapes. Muscat Canelli grapes 25 years ago was the number one grape for Texas.
That was my first. That was my first thing that I ever drank.
It makes a sweet white wine. It makes a sweet white wine. And in the land of Dr. Pepper, sweet wine's king.
Yeah, there you go.
That's just the way it was. But I asked Bobby, I said, how did you make it through? Because they went 3 years where they produced grapes, harvested grapes, and didn't get paid for grapes.
Oh, that is bad, and it does sound familiar.
And honestly, when you're in agriculture,
how do you hang on?
Crap rolls downhill.
Right.
And the farmer's always at the bottom of the hill.
There you go.
And unfortunately, that crap is not good for fertilizer. And so you get in the situation where, I asked him, I said, how did you make it? What did you do? And he said, Dusty, he said, quite frankly, we were just too poor to quit. He said, we had so much invested in it.
That should be on a T-shirt. The life of a farmer. You're too poor to quit. Yeah. I would quit, but my banker won't let me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but once it turned around, they then had an unbroken series where they've managed to do pretty well.
Yes.
This has been a rough year. This year, that particular vineyard had a late spring freeze on it that hurt the Muscat Canelli, and it also hurt the bad thing about grapes is. Let me put it this way. The good thing about grapes is that by the time May 1st rolls around, you know if you got a crop. The bad thing is you don't know if you've lost the crop on a freeze. And so you can break it, bud, and everything looks great, and it's growing well, and this is fantastic. But what happened was the cold killed your primary bud, so your secondary bud doesn't have any fruit on it. It
doesn't have the fruit.
And so you go in, and instead of making what they'll typically make on their muscats about 6 tons an acre, it'll make about a ton or less.
you don't know that,
and you don't know it, you don't know it until you spend a lot of money.
You've already you're gambling.
By the time you get to what's called veraison, where the grapes start softening and the red grapes start turning red, and they're no longer hard, acid.
Right.
But by the time you get to there, you've probably spent about 75% of your money. And grapes are just like any other high value crop. Every high value crop is also a high input crop.
Right. High risk, high reward.
Yeah. When I used to work for Texas AgriLife Extension, and I was the High Plains and West Texas Viticulture Advisor. So my territory ran from the Panhandle to just east of Abilene down to Del Rio and out to El Paso.
Okay.
I covered basically a third of the state.
Like Sonora, some of my favorite grape growers are in Sonora.
And the rest of it was, of the state was divided by 4 people, but that was me. Yes. And it was, and most of the production was up here because of another disease we'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay.
And so in that area, I used to, when I would have new grower meetings, I would tell them the grapes are the most profitable crop you can grow legally.
Yeah.
And it really was. At the time, it really was.
It's true. It
really was.
Yeah. And so a lot of people started growing. But here's the thing that I think that's interesting to think about this is that the grape growers that are here, most of them were cotton farmers.
Almost every one of them.
I mean, there's a few exceptions.
Yes.
But that is the thing that this is not an industry that's made up of hobbyists.
No.
It is it's not made up of a lot of, wealthy investors. Right. It is like our neighbors and our family. Yeah. It's the cotton growers. A lot of them are still cotton growers.
Yes. Yeah. Almost with very few exceptions, they're all cotton growers. I mean, if you, generally speaking, people that do it on a small, that are not farmers, that are not cotton farmers, those vineyards are small. They're 2 to 10 acres max.
Right. And our vineyards are what's the largest vineyard? Leahy's?
Leahy's is the largest at about 1,000 acres.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're the largest. Right behind them is either going to be the Binghams, or the Reddy Vineyard. One of those two.
Yep.
And then if one of those two or the one out in Del City, and I don't remember the name. I cannot for the life of me remember the name of it, but there's one out in Del City. Mm-hmm. But the top, I don't know, probably 10 largest vineyards in the state are all within easy driving distance of Lubbock.
Of Lubbock, exactly. But not the wineries.
No.
Which is another story.
Yeah.
Did we talk about that yet?
Well, this is a region where, this is kind of where tourists come from, is what I've used to always say.
This is where tourists come from, not where they go to.
But,
yes, okay.
But, and a lot of vineyards aren't, vineyard, like I've given a couple of vineyard tours, had people just randomly show up that
Yes.
were wine club members of
Right.
one of the wineries that we showed, and they, they had a bottle
Yes.
of wine that was vineyard designated, and we
love
actually
that.
show
Yes.
ours actually shows up on Google Maps.
Yes, it does.
And
I've seen
so
it.
and so you can Google it and find it, and when it shows up, and then I was out there working in the morning, and this Cadillac pulls up, and I'm like, "What? How?" We're a
You
mile
are
off the
remote.
pavement.
Yes.
We're a mile off the pavement
Yes,
at this
very
thing, and
remote.
it is not a well maintained road.
No, it is not.
It is a poorly maintained road. And it beats me to death driving up and down in the Gator, much
Right,
less
yes.
anyway. But they came out, and then this lady and her daughter got out, and they were coming from moving her back from L.A. to
No way.
Austin.
Wow.
She had been at school at either at UCLA or USC or something like that, and she'd finished, and she was moving back until her job started in the fall or whatever. And they stopped, and she said, "We're a wine club." And so, I gave her the 10-cent
that.
tour. I'm like, "Well, she's like, my favorite wine is this." And I said, "Well, come here real quick." And we walked, right out there, and I said,
awesome.
"That's them." I said, "Here's what you're going to have." Got to show her that.
Well, and truly, this is like one of the, there's a few, the specialty crops are the crops that you can really think of as farm to table.
Yes.
They really are. And part of the reason why we are such a large, grapes is such a large industry is because it all stays within the state.
Yes.
And where cotton, it all leaves. In fact, it leaves,
the
unfortunately, leaves the country. Yeah.
I think there's only one cotton mill left in the U.S., and that's Origin up in Maine.
I think there's one in North Carolina still.
Is there?
Around the Raleigh area.
Okay.
I think.
Well, I know Origin in Maine, Jocko Wilnick's, and I don't remember his, that they make, but they specialize in making jeans and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu geese. So,
there you
but
go.
they
Okay.
brought it back from the dead. But yeah, specialty crops are that way, particularly because you're looking at a smaller market in a smaller sales base that you can sell it to.
Right.
And this area it's really known for trying new stuff. We've done a lot
true.
of different, Terry County, Gaines County, Yoakum County, Hockley and Lubbock County.
When you're
this
hungry,
area, you do a lot. Yeah. And you see that in, the people that are trying saffron.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Trying to do
I know.
saffron.
We're those are the kind of people that we love interviewing here on the podcast. And we've had a round table where we've taken Lacey Varman and Jeremy Brown and Kyle and talked to them about, here's 3 different, they're growing the same crop, 3 different methods, and they're trying all these different things, and that's something I want people to know about our culture is, we are we're gritty,
Yeah.
and you had to be if you lived here because, it was not an inhabitable place. Sometimes I wonder.
It really wasn't. It's funny. There's a couple of two little short stories I'll go into real quick. One of them is I remember talking to, good grief, our state representative back years ago. We were out at Newsom's Grape Day, which occurs in April every year out there. Nagelbauer, Randy Nagelbauer.
Oh, Randy Nagelbauer.
But we were talking about it at that time. Water was just becoming an issue. It was just becoming an issue that every farmer
was
knew about.
Becoming aware of.
People
People were being impacted by it.
Right. Circle systems had gone from 800 gallons a minute to 400 gallons a minute.
Right.
And everybody's like, "Hey, what's going on here? Why is wells were being people were poking more holes, but putting more straws in the cup and sucking it out of it faster." But anyway, we were talking about CRP program. And he's like, "We need to get more land out of the CRP. We need to get more back in production." I was like, "No, this country was grassland for a reason." It's my firm opinion that if done right, with some of the new cattle stuff and things like that. The problem we run into is we only get 16 or so inches of rain a year, and a lot of the people that really ring the bell on regenerative agriculture, and it's a big thing.
Yep.
They get a little bit more than that, 3 times as much. It's a lot.
We gotta get creative on those things.
Yeah.
So,
but there's always room to we've got growers right now. The grapes are what they do. They also do peanuts.
Yes.
They also do cotton. They also raise pumpkins. They've got black-eyed peas this year. They're raising Pima cotton, which is something that we could not do back in the 90s when you and I were hanging around the house. We couldn't grow Pima cotton.
Right.
And then in addition to grapes, and they also have sheep.
Yes.
You got thousands of sheep. They were really good for a while, and then all of a sudden you can't give them away, just like everything. It's that's the thing about it. If you go to the grocery store and you buy a rack of lamb, it's like I got to give it a kidney. I love me a good rack of lamb, but I mean it's
so expensive.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. I'm like, good night. I can either have this little 8 bone French rack of lambs, or I can buy these 2 nice ribeyes.
Right.
And so it's kind of a weird deal how it works because the grower side of it, they're not getting anything. You talk about people.
That is like everything. That's a whole nother podcast. Let's don't even go there.
But anyway, and so I was talking to him about that, and that was the number one thing was, hey, we need fewer acres in cotton, especially in peanuts. Peanuts and cotton, like they've gone a long ways. I'm not the biggest proponent of GMOs and seed companies and stuff like that, but the work they have done on making cotton more water use more efficiently is unbelievable.
Right. I definitely think one of the things that we talk about here is like the benefits of GMOs. There's unintended consequences, and we need to talk about those.
Absolutely,
but I think the consequences aren't necessarily what people are saying they are. So
we looked at the different types of crops that you can do. I mean, the growers in particularly in Terry County. Terry County has kind of been the bell cow because we never had the water that Gaines County had. Gaines County had oceans of water. I don't know what happened 100 million years ago down there, but they had absolutely oceans of water down there. And then you go up to around Plainview, and it was the same thing. You had a lot of water. Olton area had a lot of water in those sandhills. There's a lot of water down in Millshoe, and it started going down. But Terry County was never blessed with an overabundance of much of anything.
Right.
We're
true.
30 square miles of kind of the same.
Yeah.
But come to find out, it works out pretty good on when you're growing grapes because it's 3,400 feet in elevation, which makes it really high, pretty high area.
Right.
It's not the highest. Argentina, I think, has got some of the higher ones, but it's way higher than Napa Valley. That's like, Napa Valley is the high elevation grapes there are a couple hundred feet.
Right.
It's up on the side of the hill. You go into it and you're like, okay, so that helps with the diurnal cooling. So what makes good wine is a swing in temperature. So we have a lot of things going for us when it goes grapes. We got a dry climate, which means 2 things. One, fungal pathogens are not really much of a problem here. Most years you can get away with 1 or no fungicide applications. If you have a winery that you're dealing with that's really particular, you'll go on to it, and like we've done 3 applications this year. We really haven't needed
because they don't want that in there.
Correct.
So we do have a lot of people that listen that don't understand fungal pathogens.
Yeah.
So
and it's
something you don't want.
Yeah, it's
moldish.
Well, it's
kind of thing.
It's rot. I mean, it's basically you can walk through the vineyard when you get a field that's got it bad. You can walk down the roads and you can smell vinegar, basically.
Yeah. So it's getting it's just fermenting, kind of old moldy kind of. Yeah,
and it's fermenting and not in a good way. Basically, winemaking is just controlling rot anyway. I had a really good winemaker tell me that 15 years ago. He said the winemaker's job is to control rot, and that's basically what you're doing. But so because our normal, like on a normal June, July, or August day, our relative humidity is like single digits. Like maybe it's 12.
Right.
This has been a particularly wet year. I remember being out working, thinking, my Lord, it's humid out here, and looking at my phone at the Mesonet app, I'm like, oh, it's 18%.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yes. But at the same time, though, a couple of years ago, I was looking at it, and our dew point was like -4.
Yeah.
And so, but by dry, I mean that helps us though.
That does help.
But it hurts like on row crop stuff, like large production row crop, whether it be grain sorghum or peanuts or cotton or watermelon, pumpkins, anything like that. When it's dry like that, you really got to pour the coals to it. But with grapes, you're growing a tree. You're basically growing a tree. You're not growing an annual. You're growing a perennial, and so that gives you a little bit more leeway in your watering.
Right.
And
you're not watering as many acres.
Correct. We run a drip tape that's attached to our trellis, the post.
Right.
And so we've got 10-foot row spacing, so we have a drip line every 10 feet, and we run. And typically, I will give them, I'll run it for 2 days. That gives it 1.2 inches over the whole thing, but it's just more in that one confined area.
Right.
And so that makes the water go a little bit further.
Yes.
It takes, generally speaking, to run our emitters, you're looking at 10.1 gallons per acre per minute is what it takes to function properly.
Versus, let's talk about pivot.
Well, if you put a pivot on it, if you don't have 400 gallons a minute, you're kind of spitting in the wind.
Yes.
You're really not doing a whole lot of good. I mean, you don't anything below 400 gallons a minute is not even good air conditioning for the plants.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even do that. And a lot of stuff that we got is that way. I mean, I remember in the late 90s, one of the places that Andy's father-in-law farmed, they used to call it the 9 wells farm. And they finally took the pivot down because they had 9 wells and a quarter and couldn't get enough water.
Right. Well, so yeah, Doug's got some family land that's got 21 wells in a section, less than 200 gallons a minute.
Yeah. And so with that, you look at something so then you start looking around, okay, what can I grow on a small scale?
Right.
That makes
more money.
Got a high return.
Right.
Yeah. And, even though the cost of production, cost of getting into the game of grapes used to be, when I was with Extension in the early 2000s, I guess it was like 9 or 10 or something like that. I don't even, I've slept since I worked there. So, it was a great experience, but at the same time, I was able to look at it and say, okay, at that point in time, it cost about $15,000 an acre.
Right.
From the time you planted your grapes until the time you got your first crop, you were going to spend $15,000. And now the steel that you have to put in to the vineyard is over $9,000.
Yeah.
So
some people are using recycled stuff from the oil industry.
We did. I mean, a lot of the stuff we went in, we got T-posts from California that they'd pulled out vineyards in Central Valley and gone with it. I think at that time they were switching to pistachios maybe or almonds, one of those two. And they were taking out vineyards and so there was a lot of that you could get. So we got a semi-load of them out and put them in that way. But I mean, it's even at that, it's still, I mean, it's just mind-numbing when you think, the way we used to put them in, you had a T-post every 8 feet. Yeah. And that T-post now costs $6.
Right.
Or $6.50, I think, is what I saw them the other day. And so you got
So think about the investment that people have in that. Yeah. In an average growing season, what are you going to spend to care for them? And
we'll spend between $6,000 and probably $7,500. $6,000 and $7,500 an acre.
An acre.
And the huge chunk of that is hand labor. We have a lady that started with us in 2008, I think.
Yes.
Like shortly after we started, I think the first grapes we planted went in 2006. In 2008, she started working just as a day laborer and worked hard. And after about 4 or 5 years, we were like, hey, you got to start a contract labor crew. And so she went and got her she's got a licensed labor contractor and does all the bells and whistles. But we use her for the vast majority of it. And, that's a big check you cut to her. I mean, she's probably I mean, of course she pays because she
pays all your people.
At times at the most people I had working for me this year was we had, I think, 47 people for about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that gets expensive.
Out here on the Texas plains, water is everything, and there's a resource that's as vital as it is fragile: our Ply Lakes. These lakes are nature's reservoir, catching rainwater to recharge our aquifer and provide lifelines for wildlife. But now they need our help. In collaboration with the Texas Ply Lakes Conservation Initiative and the Cargill Global Water Challenge, SARA has started the Our Legacy is Tomorrow's Water initiative to inspire and work with landowners to restore and protect our Ply Lakes. Each playa we save helps secure a sustainable water future for the generations that will be coming after us. Whether it's improving soil health, restoring habitats, or recharging groundwater, we are committed to making a difference. Together, we can build a legacy that we can all be proud of. To learn how you can join in, visit the Ply Lakes Restoration Initiative page on the SARA website. Let's keep Texas water flowing strong for the future. Visit SARA-conservation.com. Well, and you think about, I don't know how many 5,000 acres of grapes. I mean, that is a lot of jobs that this industry is still, providing people.
It is
that's something that,
and everybody manages vineyards a little bit differently. I know a lot of people will not have the same cost of production as us, because as the vineyard ages, you have to have a better level of knowledge when people are working in it. And so that drives cost up a little bit more. It slows things down
more
too,
skilled
because
labor. You need skilled labor.
Yeah. When you're putting them in, a trained monkey can do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, but once they get 7, 8, 9 years old, you start seeing the effects of the weather. You lose spur positions. Well, you have to retrain a spur. You get hail damage on it. Well, you have to retrain recognize, hey, there's hail damage on this cordon. We got to cut the cordon out and retrain a new one. And so it makes it challenging. Mm-hmm. And that's the cost of production has gone up. But conversely, just like everything else in agriculture, the cost that the money that we're getting for our grapes has not gone up the same. Mm-hmm. It has gone up some.
Yeah.
Mostly because we're holding the line and saying, hey, you've got to pay more for this.
Right.
But we had this the first year. We actually had a winery that is a new one to us that we had sold through someone that sold to through one of our existing clients over the last couple of 3 years.
Okay.
Well, this year they they had a good relationship, but they're having to pay. Yeah, they went from that. The client that we were selling to was making wine and then selling them wine.
So
they got their own facility built. They knew it was coming. It was not acrimonious or anything like that. And worked back around to it where they came in and bought grapes, but they wanted to hand harvest a lot of fruit. And they brought a company in that is actually, I believe it's a publicly traded company now out of California that has a branch in the Hill Country.
Okay.
Because a lot of the vineyards in the Hill Country are small, and they are owned by people that are retired doctors, lawyers, people that have had a good career.
Right.
And they've got their little...
their hobby
got their ranch in air quotes
out
there, and they put in a vineyard out there, and it's 2 acres, 3 acres. There's a couple of bigger, getting to be a couple of bigger ones down there now, but I think 40 acres is still a substantial vineyard.
And they were down there before, but they had disease.
Yeah,
in the soil, Pearson's disease. So that's why really stuff moved up here.
Yeah, and it's Pearson's disease is they got it in like Temecula, Southern California, where it's warm. The glassy and blue wing sharpshooters, glassy wing sharpshooter and blue wing sharpshooters are a vector for it. Carry it out through it. I mean, you still can't grow vinifera grapes, which is the wine grapes.
Okay.
You can't grow vinifera grapes from the Houston area because they'll all get Pearson's disease and die. Okay. They've done a lot of work on it, but Pearson's disease is one of those things that comes and goes in waves. If you track the government funding for Pearson's disease research, it comes in like 10 or 15 year cycles, where it'll be like the most funded project in the history of ever, and then it'll get like $1.50. I mean, it's just because it comes in waves. It hits the vineyards, it obliterates a vineyard in a remarkably short period of time. It can literally take a productive vineyard to nothing in about 2 years.
And we don't have it here because
it's cold.
It's cold and it kills all that off.
We don't. There's the number one reason is we have what's called winter cold therapy. Basically, the same reason they don't have it in Washington State.
Yeah,
because it gets cold enough that what happens is it's just like getting say West Nile virus. You get it from a mosquito. Well, the glassy wing sharpshooter and the blue wing sharpshooter, inject it. They've got this bacteria in there. It's Xylella fastidiosus, I think is what it's called. That seems like I'm trying to say something from Harry Potter, but I think that's right.
Yeah.
But Xylella gets in there and it clogs up the vascular system and it basically chokes it down.
Okay.
It's just like when your plumbing gets clogged. It's the same thing. And so you start seeing typical signs of drought stress on something that's got plenty of water. But where we get infected by it, then it gets cold enough that it actually kills that bacteria inside the trunk.
Okay.
And so it'll
interesting. Okay.
And so that's the cold therapy theory on it.
Okay.
And then they have used, interestingly enough, not to go too far off in the weeds, they've actually been able to grow better in areas that are more susceptible to it because of the use of neonicotinoids. And so they inject imidacloprid through the irrigation water.
Okay.
And it takes it up into the plant, translocates it through it. The piercing sucking insect, it cuts down on the amount of feeding those piercing sucking insects do.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay.
It doesn't I mean, it'll kill them if they feed on it, but the actual incidence of feeding actually goes down on plants that have been treated.
Interesting.
And so you're still going to have, I'm just going to pull some numbers out for a good round.
Okay.
So you have 10% of your bites are get infected.
Okay.
Well, you're still going to have 10% of your bites get infected, but it's less attractive. So instead of having 1,000 bites with 100 infection sites, you've got 100 with 10 infection sites.
Interesting.
And so it slows the progression of it down quite a bit. And there's been some indication that there's some other products that help, with that as well. But
that's these biological products? Is that where?
No.
What is that word? Is that the name of a chemical?
What?
What is this product that you're putting on
the neonicotinoid?
Yes.
That
sounds like
it's basically a synthetic nicotine pesticide.
Okay. So that's what I was.
But it has some severe downsides on it. There's some indications that it may contribute to the decline in the honeybees.
Oh.
And because of that, I'm very, I'm not a huge fan of using I mean, I use it because, dear Lord, it's easy.
Oh,
I mean, you inject it. I can inject it in May, and I don't have to worry about anything feeding any piercing, sucking insect, leaf hoppers, flea hoppers, anything like that feeding on any of my grapes the rest of the year. But we also try to do it as quickly as I can. And we don't have a cover crop in our vineyards here, so we don't have.
So you're not attracting bees anyway,
right? Yeah, and so most of my, I like to push I like to make sure that the non-grape areas of my vineyard, of the land that our vineyard sits on, is a very good habitat. I love looking at wildflowers. I love years like this where we had multiple rains come in, and the hillside, which we actually have kind of a hillside on it.
Yes, it's in yes, it is.
It turns, it turned red with Indian blankets. It turned, yellow with prairie sunflowers. All the, just go through and all these the different colors that it comes just in waves.
Yeah,
and it's fantastic. I mean, I love to have that. I'm a big quail guy, and so I do things to help that. And, but since we don't have a cover crop, we don't have to in the vineyard.
Right.
We don't have. It's not taken up by wildflowers and then potentially moved into pollen.
Right. So you're really like, come over here, bees.
Yeah.
But don't come over here because there's nothing.
There's
for
not
you.
actually anything in the grapes to attract them.
No, right. Yeah.
Because grapes are
But you don't have anything in between your rows.
Correct. Yeah.
That is going to attract them either. And so you're kind of like, you're giving them a detour.
Yeah.
Stop over at McDonald's.
Yeah.
Because the Sonic is closed.
Well, but McDonald's is bad for them too. That's
McDonald's would be bad for them
but
too.
No,
so,
but I mean, you've got it. So we got with the closed pollination system, you don't have to have bees in grapes. By the time there's no actual flower. I mean, there is a technical flower, but
they're not going to come over there. But they're not going to come over there. So we'll move on. Okay.
Although yellow jackets do like them. They like to make nests in them.
Yes.
So
well, that's how
you get to have fun when you sample grapes because you stick your hand in blindly and that's a yellow jacket I just pulled out, and that hurts. But that chemical though has allowed grapes to succeed in a bigger area. And there also is some work that they've done at, I think it's UC Davis and some other places in California with converting with crossing Cabernet like vinifera grapes with varieties of grapes that are resistant to Pierce's disease, which most of the native grapes are resistant to Pierce's disease. You're not going to see Mustang grapes that are going to die from Pierce's disease. You're not going to see whatever random grapes growing in the draws and gullies around El Paso die from Pierce's disease.
Yes.
And so they've crossed that, but the problem is you wind up with, no matter how many times you back cross that, because grapes are weird when you cross them. But no matter how many times you back cross that, you're still not you wind up with a Cabernet type grape that is resistant to Pierce's disease, but you don't wind up with Cabernet that is resistant to Pierce's disease.
Interesting.
And with the way that the wine industry is, that's a big distinction. It's not like a tortilla. But I mean, it's the same. There's a lot more ego in the wine industry that you have to circumvent around that and work through that. But I mean, there's some tracks and some things that are doing that. I don't know how well that funded that is now because Pierce's disease has kind of been off the radar for about the last 6 or 7 years. Yeah. But I hear that it's coming back. People that are in the know say, hey, it's going to be a problem again. But we don't have that up here, and it's gone well. So that's allowed our industry to succeed in its infancy very, very well.
Right. And that makes the wineries dependent on our area. And then let's talk about, there's 500, the last I heard, there were 540 wineries. Most of them are in the Austin area. And that's a lot of places for people to go to in one area. So, and now people are not drinking as much wine.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I mean,
and those wineries have invested a lot of money in their locations, et cetera, et cetera. They are not vertically integrated. Some of them are, some of them aren't, but most of them aren't.
Yeah.
And so they have to cut cost.
Yep.
And where's the easiest way to cut cost?
The easiest way to cut cost is you don't buy Texas fruit. You buy finished California wine for $3 a gallon.
And you call it.
You just call it whatever. As long as you don't try to label it as Texas, it doesn't matter where it comes from. When you put Texas on it, I think it has to be 75%.
I think it is up to
Texas,
75
I think it's
now.
75% now. I know like Washington, and I think Washington is either 95 or 100%. I think New York has got to be 100%.
Yeah, we've had a hard time, I think, working that. I think that's kind of been an industry battle, because the farmers like, wait a minute.
Yeah. But I mean, it is.
It's kind of like tricking people.
It is. It's, nobody's explicitly lying.
Right.
Let me rephrase that. I'm sure people being people and the number of people in the industry, somebody somewhere is explicitly lying.
Right.
Okay. But that's not but that's the outlier.
Right.
What it boils down to is you've got a couple of people, and I mean, you've got some smaller wineries. There's one we're picking fruit for tonight that he's very small. He'll never be big. He's a French guy, and he makes really good French-style wines in Texas.
Yeah.
And most people make California-style wines, and he makes very French-style wines, and they're very different.
Yeah.
But he does a very, very good job with it. But he is very much, this is how I want to do things, and we're going to do this.
Yes.
But he's only going to make, a couple hundred cases a year, 500, 1,000 cases a year.
Yeah.
Something like that. But I just talked to a really good friend of mine who has a winery that started in May of 2013. And he told me, this has been a month ago, I guess.
Okay.
He told me, he said, I just had the worst July I've ever had. He said, ever. He said July of 2013 was a better month than July of 2024. And you've got a lot of, the land down there, right on 290. 290 is the Silverado Trail.
It is.
I mean, it's Highway 26, it's Silverado Trail. It's all those rolled into one.
Yeah.
And it runs all the way from Fredericksburg. Actually, I think the first one, there's a winery or two west of Fredericksburg on 290, all the way out to Johnson City.
It's just solid.
It's just, and it's gone crazy. I hadn't been there. I went there maybe last year, and I hadn't been there for like 3 or 4 years because I just, with kids and that kind of stuff, I just, didn't have a reason. And prior to that, I'd been down there very frequently, as frequently as once a week, doing consulting down there. And I went back and I didn't recognize it.
Right.
I mean,
it is shocking. It is.
I was going down 290 thinking, I know where this guy, where the heck? But that land down there has gone, it started off expensive. It was $10,000 an acre.
Right.
And now you can't even buy stuff off of 290 at that.
Right.
I talked to somebody the other day that a new one had gone in, I think last year, and I believe that the rumor had it they were paying like $50,000.
Well, and that's the issue. So they've invested a lot of money.
That's a lot of money,
and so have we on the High Plains, who have,
yes,
a lot of labor, and it is not a hobby for us. It is our living, and when you have a contract to sell your grapes and somebody backs out,
it's tough,
and it has been tough for everybody.
Yeah, and it's there's no sacred cows on this. There's no vineyards that are sacred. Every vineyard I know of has at least some portion of it that they didn't sell. I mean, we're very, very stupidly fortunate, and we've also got some other reasons why that we were able to sell the vast majority of ours. But even us, we have got stuff. We got 156 acres, and we're not going to sell all 156 acres.
Well, and I know. I mean, I've talked to other friends who are like, they would say like this X amount of,
Yeah.
tons were
Yeah.
the winery walked on them.
Yeah.
We don't need them this year. What?
I mean, I know people that I know of a winery that walked on 80 tons in August.
And you've spent, and people have already spent like a lot of money per acre on that. So you haven't just like at the beginning of the year said, oh, I'm not going to put any money in this because first of all, even if you get freeze, you don't know for sure if you are going to be damaged or not. So you're going to spend the money anyway.
Yeah.
And it is not like an annual crop.
Correct.
To where you can just say, oh, I just won't do anything to them this year.
Yeah.
No, they have to be maintained. They have to be cared for.
There's a baseline of labor that you have to put into it. And you can do a couple of things mechanically to cheat that and make that number pretty low. But even doing it pretty low, I would spend, like let's say I went in and let's just pick we've got a bunch of them. So let's say that our Cinsault that we've got 10-acre block of Cinsault. Let's say half of it they didn't want anymore. Well, I could go in there and I could mechanically do it, and then send a crew through to just get what I missed. And so I'm leaving mechanically barrel pruning.
Okay.
Yeah. Instead of cutting it back to 2 buds where it's relatively short, 2 to 4 inches.
Yes.
I'm leaving 7-8 inches.
Okay.
So I'm leaving like 4 to 6 buds. Which is not good because the top couple of buds will probably break, and then you wind up with your spurs being really long, and that causes problems in and of itself. But even if I did that and send a crew through to clean out what I missed so that everything was was relatively the right height. And then I went out and I put a pre-emergent herbicide under my vines to keep my weeds out. I would spray it a couple of times with a contact herbicide to make sure I burned the suckers off of it so that they're not chewing up growth, and so that I can at least get the growth where I need it to be. By the time it's all said and done, I've spent more than most growers will spend on a cotton crop per acre on a per acre basis, but I'm only doing it on 5 acres instead of doing it on 120 acres in a pivot.
Right.
And so it's in agriculture right now. There are no sacred cows that are not being slaughtered.
Yeah, it's very true. That's
every one of them are dying. It's it's from the cattle industry to the sheep industry to the dairy industry, and it's cotton is 70 cents now. I remember in '92 when it hit like 65 cents, and I thought this is fantastic, 65 cents. Well, it was $1.13 last year, and now it's half that. It's not quite half, but
guess what else has not come down?
The prices
of everything else.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's the models of agriculture in general is just not
This
great.
is another topic we will discuss another day.
But it's been. When you look at what grapes have got, when you go in and like, okay, we got to cut this out. You can do that for about 2 years, and then you've got to go in and you've got to fix everything you've screwed up.
Right.
Because that's what you're doing. You're actually going back in and you're screwing up the grapes.
Right.
And it's calculated risk that you take on it, but. At this point, that's where you're standing at. You're just looking at trying to do the best you can with what you got.
Okay, so I've heard someone say, "Oh, this is just a market correction." What are your thoughts on that?
No, it's not as much of market correction.
Like we have too many grapes.
Well, we do, but the only reason we have too many grapes is because nobody's buying wine. Yes. If people were buying wine like they did in 2022,
right.
This would be a moot point.
Right.
We would still be rocking on and rolling.
So what are the theories I've heard, I know marijuana usage has increased while wine, consumption has gone down.
It's not just wine. All alcohol.
All alcohol. Yes, I should clarify. All alcohol has. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think part of it is just, what is it? What?
People are broke.
You think it's just people don't buy, because so I threw that out to a group of people at an event I was at last week, and all of them were like, "Oh no, we still buy wine. We're still buying it." And so who is it? Is there this really important sector of people that have been buying that are now gone?
You've got
as far as spending money on it.
You've got a section of people like the middle class. Okay, you've got the middle class that's sitting there in one piece, and you've got all labor's stratosphere in that. You got the upper middle class, middle class, and lower middle class.
Right.
Well, you had upper middle class trying to spend like they were rich.
Right. Okay.
And then you've got the middle class trying to spend like their upper middle class.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Everybody's trying to spend up.
Okay.
On that.
Right.
And I think what you're running into is people as a group are not typically the brightest. When you get a bunch of people together, you get a herd mentality. But what you get on an individual basis, people are very intelligent.
Yeah.
And they're very much aware of what they need and what their self-worth is. I mean, there's outliers everywhere on this thing. But I think you've got a bunch of people who are, maybe they were dinks, dual income, no kids, 2 or 3 years ago. And maybe they decided to have kids, or maybe one of them got laid off. Or, maybe they're like, hey, you know what? There was a huge rush. Like when COVID shut everything down, nobody could go anywhere.
Yeah.
And everybody got a bunch, there was a big chunk of money went out in there. And, you had people that couldn't go they couldn't go to Italy.
Well, they couldn't go to Napa Valley, but they could come to.
The wineries in Texas were still. They jumped. Wineries jumped through hoops and basically became restaurants.
Right.
To do it. I mean, there was some very creative lobbying and creative bill writing and not even bill writing, because they didn't do anything legislatively. They just did it by fiat.
Yeah.
But there were some really creative people in that figured out a way to keep the doors open. And when nobody could go anywhere, you had a huge population that suddenly was never going to see another poor day.
I've read that we surpassed Napa Valley in tourism that year. We've been neck and neck with them.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
we did. But it's primarily because California was much stricter on.
That's right. I know. Obviously, that's the reason why, because they shut things down. But I know that we have had a lot of tourism. So is this strictly a Texas issue, or is this a international?
International. This is a worldwide issue. Wine consumption is down worldwide. Alcohol consumption as a whole is down worldwide. The company that owns, I think it's Jose Cuervo, I think. It's a big holding company that owns it. They reported their first sales drop in history.
Oh my goodness!
Like this last year.
Wow.
They're actually, it was one section of their of the world. It wasn't like overall they sold less.
Okay, yeah.
But they actually had a place that had negative sales, year-over-year sales.
Wow.
And when they've got a big portfolio. I think they sell Johnny Walker and stuff like that.
Right.
And so it's a big deal. And it was it was big. It was a pretty big headline if you were looking for it.
Right.
And it was kind of shocking to see that. But wine consumption is down. Alcohol consumption is down. You look at Gen Z does not drink much.
Right. That's what I've heard too. Yes.
I heard the funniest thing. I heard a guy say, it's not necessarily a bad thing if they're not drinking, because they think that it's bad, but it may be a bad thing if they're drinking because they don't have any friends to go out drinking with. Yeah. Because they're all on their phone.
That's funny, yeah.
But that's just what but when you're looking at the industry as a whole, the whole alcohol industry as a whole has gone down. And I think you're seeing it, you don't just see it in alcohol. You also see it in restaurants are going down, sales are going down. You're starting to see some pretty big names that are taking it in the shorts on some of this stuff.
But I think that this has been fun. I'm glad that people were able to sit in and listen to, and I hope that you found something interesting in this conversation, because there were a lot of things that we talked about, but I hope you learned something about wine. And Lost Draw is the name of Andy's, our brother's winery, and you can find that location there in Johnson City.
There's one in Fredericksburg and one in Johnson City.
In Johnson City also. They're part of the William Chris is part of that group, and some of the, I think, best wines in Texas. And
I agree.
So enjoy the podcast.
All our fault. We
That's it. Yeah, it's all our fault. Enjoy the podcast, and may I say, with a glass of Texas wine.
Or a bottle.
Or a bottle, yes.
Case would even be better.
A case. Thanks, friends, for joining us for another episode of Conservation Stories. This is your host, Tillery Timmons-Sims, and I hope you have enjoyed this conversation with my brother, Dusty. We'll see you next time.